Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. You know, guys, I've been feeling kinda left out recently. Apparently, there was a memo that got sent to every single Reddit YouTuber that stated that we're supposed to believe every word that gets typed on Reddit, and that it's an unforgivable sin to not treat every Reddit post as if it were an infallible literary masterpiece. Unfortunately, I never got that memo, and until I do, I'm probably gonna keep being a judgmental prick. See, in the past, whenever I've read RPG horror stories, I've made a habit of criticizing the OP just as much as I do the problem players. But what if there was a subreddit where users actually wanted you to judge them? Well, dear viewer, that subreddit exists, and it's called r/am I the asshole. The rules of this subreddit are simple. The OP posts their story, and then lets Reddit rank them using one of three categories. You're the asshole, not the asshole, and everybody sucks here. Despite the inherent stupidity that trusting a website like Reddit to tell you how to live your life entails, I couldn't help but be captivated. As I was browsing this alien subreddit, I noticed that a significant quantity of these posts happened to be D&D horror stories in their own right. And if you think that I'm not gonna take the opportunity to swan dive directly into this untapped wellspring of cringe, you would be mistaken. Ladies and gentlemen, court is now in session. All rise for the dishonorable Judge Drake, and let us dive headfirst into the judgmental world of r/am I the asshole. Enjoy. Story 1 is titled, Am I the asshole for wanting written confirmation that a player in my D&D game quit when I know that my sister is uncomfortable around them? So I, 21 female, run a D&D game, and two of the players, my sister, 22 female, and player A, got into an argument. The TLDR is that player A had a crush on her, but after being rejected, he sent his buddies to sabotage her work. Against my advice, they suddenly agreed to be friends again, and they got into another argument, which led to him leaving the group chat we have for the games, with no word whatsoever. I've put a lot of work into building this campaign from scratch, making custom icons, and I made custom stream overlays, since I plus the others like to stream the games, which everyone involved with was aware of before we started. She was the one who actually brought him into the campaign, actually. She had asked me to let him join, and I initially didn't want to because of their history, but eventually gave in because she insisted that it would be fine. Normally, I would be right behind my sister, but for some reason, him leaving without a word just doesn't sit right with me. So I figured that I can take the high road and leave my DMs open for a week in case he decided to finally inform me of his departure, so that at least I could tell myself that he had the chance to tell me before cutting off contact. Truth be told, even if he did decide to contact me, I wouldn't have let him back into the game, even if he bowed down, which my sister knew about. My sister did not like that. She's accused me of prioritizing my game over her, and demanded that I cut off all contact immediately, continually telling me over the course of a few days that he's not going to contact you, just block him already, which doesn't make much sense to me. If you know for a fact nothing is going through the door, why not leave it open a little bit longer before closing it? We've already argued about it twice, but she doesn't seem to care about what I've decided to do. So just to appease her, I finally blocked him. So, am I the asshole for wanting to let player A have the chance to tell me that he was quitting the game himself? Okay, let's go ahead and look at the facts here. We have a guy who sends his friends to your sister's place of work to harass her after she rejects his creepy romantic advances. And you want to keep the door open for him? OP, you are definitely the asshole here. What do you think you're gonna get by leaving your DMs open for this guy? Do you not see all the ways that this can go wrong? Example, what if he messages you and asks to come back? You said you would reject him. Okay, that's all well and good if this guy didn't have a history of harassing people for rejecting him. Yeah, OP, your logic is fucking flawless. And that's not even taking how this looks from your sister's perspective into account. Just imagine, her own sister desperately hoping for one last piece of closure from the man who makes her feel unsafe in her own home. And then you have the gall to harp on about how you worked so hard on this campaign. This is your sister. At this point, I don't think she cares about the custom icons you made. You're the asshole, OP, no doubt about it. Before we move on, I want to make something apparent. If you don't agree with my ruling, go ahead and type up your own perspective in the comments below. Maybe you'll provide me some insight that I didn't think about. Alright, let's go judge some more strangers. Story 2 is titled, Am I the asshole for killing off a player character in a D&D game? I'm a DM/GM for a semi-regular group of players for a digital D&D game. From the beginning, I told them that I wanted a short backstory for each character that they would create, and slowly build it more and more, with some details being openly revealed to the party. I also emphasized to them that their actions would have consequences for the group as a whole, as they would be earning what I dubbed reputation points as they progressed. Reputation points could be positive or negative. Positive reputation meant better upgrades to their airship, better quest rewards, etc., etc. Negative reputation meant steeper prices in shops, fewer harbors willing to allow them to land, fewer quests, etc., etc. Most of my players understood this, and also understood the basic rule of, you're not the main character by yourself. Everyone in the party is a main character too. A player who we'll call C thought she was the only person who should be the main character, and it got her in some serious trouble in-game. Theft, stalking, identity theft, breaking and entering, coercion, threats against nobility, attempted blackmail, bribery, attempted murder, and attempted theft of confidential information and drugs. This negatively affected the group's reputation. NPCs were talking, and it wasn't looking good. The other players were getting frustrated and extremely uncomfortable with some of the things that happened, and were continuing to happen. They wanted to play a good group. Not lawful good, but most characters were good, with various flavors of chaos thrown in. But C kept pushing them into an evil light. C kept stating how she only played chaotic good characters, and this was all okay for her to do because of her backstory. Her backstory was longer than my other players combined. When I attempted to talk to C about what was happening, she would just brush me off and argue with my ruling as a DM. She would tell me that she was just doing what her character would do. Her background was a sheltered noble. This went on for almost 2 months, until I told C that she needed to step away from the group for a while. I also told her that if she bowed out gracefully and didn't cause a scene, I would let her character serve a jail sentence peacefully before being sent home, and she would be able to rejoin the group later. I would also talk to the group and see if people would be willing to let her back into the group if she apologized after the break. C didn't listen, so I brought in an assassin. This assassin had been hired by someone powerful that she had impersonated, who found out and was pissed. The assassin poisoned her food, she failed her con save, No one had any antidotes, and she failed her death save. She immediately started yelling at me that it wasn't fair, and I was singling her out, and I hated her, and I was taking away her friends. When I talked to my other players, they said that I had been more than generous and fair. They said that I gave her chance after chance, and she blew it. Okay, so this one has a lot more gray area than the last one. The first thing I want to address is that OP paints themselves as flawless in this story. There is no way that some rando not looking that deeply into this post could possibly think that they were the asshole. Which begs the question, why is it even here? This raises some red flags for me, since it seems to me like OP is looking more for validation than any actual opinions. Which makes me doubt whether or not they're actually a reliable narrator. But we need to focus on what information we do have. While I 100% support the f**k around and find out philosophy, I don't think OP went about doing things the right way here. Yes, it's infuriating when main character syndrome takes root, and OP absolutely did the right thing taking C aside and talking to her. Even that cooling off period they proposed was a good call. Issues start to arise when you look at how OP executed, well, her execution. Instead of simply telling her to leave, it sounds like C was invited to yet another session, only to have her character be insta-killed by an assassin's poison. In what world would that not cause unnecessary drama? The only reasonable explanation for why you would do what you did is that you wanted to make an example of her. And what players want to play in a game where the DM is spiteful enough to make an example of their players? I'm not saying that C didn't deserve it, because she absolutely did. But I can't blame her for accusing you of singling her out, because that's kinda what you did. Everyone sucks here. Story 3 is titled, Am I the asshole for banning my wife from talking to her male friend after he started flirting while playing D&D? My wife and I have been together for 10 years. The problem started in the D&D group we have with some mutual friends, and my wife's oldest friend, Patrick. Patrick is a very good-looking guy. He runs marathons, owns successful businesses, and is perpetually single. He and my wife have no romantic history, and they've been friends since they were kids. Now, I don't know if it's because of the lockdown and he can't get out and date, but for the past 2 months, Patrick has been getting really flirtatious with my wife. My wife is the DM of our group, and Patrick has started flirting with all of her characters, which my wife responded to, in character, really well at first, but lately has been clipping the interactions shorter and shorter. I know that she has even had a talk with Patrick about not making the game so sexual. We talked about it and she agreed that he's getting flirtatious, but she thought he was just bored and lonely. She said that she would talk to him about it. And then one day last week, my wife was in the shower and a message popped up on her phone. It was Patrick. And it said, "I understand what you're saying, but please hear me out. This is tearing me up." I waited until my wife got out and asked her if I could see the rest of the messages, and we opened it together. Her messages to him were about how inappropriate he was being, and that she wondered if it wasn't just depression clouding his judgment, and did he want to talk about how he was feeling in isolation. Patrick's reply then said how beautiful she's been looking lately, and how he can't help himself getting flirty while we were playing because he is just so into her characters, because she's such a fantastic DM, so creative and expressive and funny, etc., etc. My wife was upset and said that she would talk to him again, but I said that I wanted to talk to him. I told her that he's out of the D&D group, obviously, and I didn't want her talking to him at all anymore. She called me controlling and said that she could handle it and thinks that we should go easy because he's probably just not dealing with the lockdown very well, and we need to handle it gently. I disagree. Am I the asshole here for banning my wife from talking to him and wanting to talk to him myself? Oh boy, this one is spicy. Right off the bat, we can say that Patrick is definitely an asshole, but we're not talking about Patrick. We're talking about the OP. OP definitely has the right to be uncomfortable with Patrick's behavior, and I was definitely in OP's corner, until this little bit right here. OP, you made it very obvious that your wife is not interested in this man, and is not showing any signs of wanting to be disloyal to you. So you banning her from trying to deal with her own problems and trying to step in to deal with it yourself is the kind of move a vindictive man-child would make. I may have understood where you were coming from if she were just indifferent to Patrick, but it sounds to me like she's making concerted efforts to get Patrick to fuck off. That, in combination with you spending a good chunk of the story describing how desirable Patrick is, again combined with the fact that you try to tug on your wife's leash like she were a defenseless toy poodle, really paints a picture of how insecure you are about you and your wife's relationship. And that's something that you both gotta work out. You're the asshole, OP. Story 4 is titled AITA for ending our D&D campaign and our friendship? Hey all, this is my first time posting to this sub, so I hope I don't do anything that clashes too horribly with the rules. Using a throwaway because everyone I know IRL knows my username and I'm a coward. Anyway, as this title explained, I ended my first long-term Dungeons & Dragons campaign tonight following a hissy fit from a player that I'll call Devin. Devin played a chaotic good rogue self-insert, but most would define his general attitude as being more chaotic stupid than anything. To list a few standout moments within our last 2 sessions, he's tried to steal prosthetic arms for amputees, needlessly dragged the party into a fight with a high-level NPC, and started a bar fight with one of his fellow PCs for no reason. And that's leaving out a lot of similar events. Tonight was only our 3rd session. During this session, he was pulled into questioning because he happened to trigger a scripted event that I had planned since session 1. If a party member picked up some golden feathers in the first dungeon and flaunted them out in town, then they would be brought into questioning later, because the feathers belonged to a missing person. They would join up with the party again within the same session because they didn't have anything to do with this person's disappearance. Well, Devin seemed to think that this was a personal attack, and threw a massive fit before finally acquiescing, and muting his mic on Discord while his 2 party members continued on their merry way. When it came time for Devin to be interrogated though, he never came back. We messaged him and waited for him for 30 minutes, and he still refused to return. Because of this childish reaction to a story beat, I decided to pull the plug on the campaign full stop. This was a decision that the 2 fellow players supported as well. If he wasn't willing to accept that his actions had consequences, then I wasn't willing to put up with his self-indulgent pity party anymore. I put a lot of hard work and care into this session, and he sank it without any regard for how much it would hurt me. Because of this, he has been unfriended on all social media platforms, and I'm sure he understands why. One of my players reached out to him after the fact, and he let her know that he never came back because he fell asleep. Why did he fall asleep? Because he didn't like his time being wasted for honestly a subpar reason. His words. He turned this into grounds to attack me and say that I'm targeting him in particular as an ongoing personal attack rather than just a story beat. I've always considered this campaign to be more businesslike. Any drama from the outside doesn't come inside. My players and I tried to tell him that what I did wasn't personal, but he is still insisting that I'm in the wrong here. So Reddit, I ask you, am I the asshole for ending our campaign tonight? There's a saying that I don't really emphasize too often on this channel, but I know that I really should. No D&D is better than bad D&D, and OP here has followed that saying to a T. To me, it sounds like Devin didn't care about your game at all. Instead, only thinking about how much he could mess it up under the guise of being in character. No DM should have to tolerate disrespect like that, and I applaud you for knowing when to say, "No sir, I'm not doing it." There's no shame in having a spine, and at the end of the day, the DM is providing a service, and you have the right to refuse service to anyone, not the asshole. Story 5 is titled, AITA for telling the hosts of our D&D game that their baby is an issue. I've been a part of a group of adults that get together to play D&D every week for about 3 years now. We've mostly had our games at the home of a married couple that we are all friends with. They go out of their way to rearrange their basement for us to play, and they have a large supply of game paraphernalia and minis that belong to the husband. They also usually supply snacks, although others bring some to share as well. I've always appreciated that they open up their home to use for game nights. Most of us would not have the space that we would need to get together. A little more than a year now, they had a baby. I have no issues with children in general, I just don't have a lot of experience with them. The wife also started playing in our games. There are 2 different ones, which I was really excited about because she is a good friend of mine. Previously, there had been a long-running game with a heavy storyline. That would have been hard to get into. But with the new one starting, she took that chance. Now to the issue. The baby is mobile, loud, and a distraction. He gets into things that he's not supposed to, and has landed them in the emergency room because they thought he had eaten something dangerous during one of our games. He was fine, but better safe than sorry. When he starts making a lot of noise, either the wife or the husband would have to leave the table to take care of him. This would either cause them to miss the storyline or combat, or stall the game for a long time. If they just end up missing what goes on, we still have to explain all of the events that happened when they get back. The baby also screams while playing, and causes headaches for many. I am not the DM for either of these 2 games that are hosted at that house, so I didn't want to be the one to bring up the issue with them. Please note that everyone came to the consensus that the baby was an issue, and was affecting everyone's enjoyment. We are busy adults, and we have little time for ourselves, and the game nights are how we all unwind and have fun. It was becoming more stress and headaches than any fun. After a few months of trying to deal with the issue, it was finally brought up by one of the DMs to the couple. The wife did not take it well. She apparently said something like, "So I can't play ever again." She has removed herself from all of the group chats, and from what I hear, she is still very upset more than a week later. I have a lot of empathy for how she's feeling, so I feel horrible. I wanted her to be included and to spend time with her because she is my friend. I would also feel bad for suggesting that they pay for a babysitter, because I know babies are not cheap, and the husband just got let go of his job of over 10 years. TLDR, the couple that hosts our game nights at their house had a baby. The baby has become an issue and a distraction. Wife can no longer participate even though she was just able to join. Okay, so I want to start by saying this up front. You are the asshole. I mean, yeah, I get that kids are annoying as hell. And in some scenarios, you may even be in the right here. Like if you were hosting the games and if you asked them not to bring their kid, I would totally get that. But you are entering their home. What do you expect them to do? Just throw their screaming toddler in a closet with a bag of goldfish for the 3 to 6 hours it takes for you to play a session? That's how creatures like Chris Chan are born. Look, I love D&D, and I don't have any plans of being a father for a long time. But I'm not enough of a psychopath to think that pretending to be a wizard on the weekends is more important than caring for my own son. The biggest thing that solidifies it for me is that you try to justify it by saying, but everyone else thinks the kid is annoying too. That just means you're all assholes. You came into this couple's home, used their expensive gaming gear, minis, and basement, and then all as a collective told them that their child was an inconvenience to you pretending to be wizards. I can ease up on you a bit, since according to the edits you made, you came to your senses, and you're all pitching in to try and hire a babysitter. But your relationship with Mama Bear is gonna need a lot of repairing after that. You are the asshole. Story 6 is titled, AITA. My friend invited his wife to play D&D with us, and now a third of our jokes are deemed inappropriate. My friends and I are in our 30s, and share a sense of humor that feels perfectly in line with most guys our age. We're a playfully juvenile bunch, known to toss in a masturbation reference here and there, but our jokes wouldn't raise a single eyebrow on a site like this. Now, I acknowledge that it's a purely subjective assessment, and perhaps I shouldn't assume Reddit standards are somehow universal. But that's why I'm here, writing this post. I'm not searching for blind affirmation, I'm genuinely curious if my frustrations are out of line. So we haven't actually begun playing D&D with the wife, but she was included on our prolific text chain a few days ago. Almost immediately, the husband began sending tisk-tisk replies to the few of us who made what he determined were inappropriate jokes. I have no idea if the wife was actually offended or not, but the husband is clearly bothered. Granted, he didn't flip out or anything, but he did continuously remind us that his wife was now included, and asked us to stop making references to farts and jizz. As silly as it all sounds, it's clearly a new era for our social group. My instincts tells me that this is kinda bullshit. Keep in mind, I wouldn't make a lot of these jokes if I was with a group that I wasn't familiar with, or even out to dinner with this particular couple. But if you're that keen to integrate your wife into a closed social group that has a well-established set of norms, aren't you inherently suggesting that she's on a similar enough wavelength? I'll admit, I'm trying to suss out if my expectations for the group are a bit misogynistic. Part of me feels like that word has nothing to do with it. I was initially excited to learn that his wife was joining our group. As I had previously alluded to, I naturally assumed that she was invited because she shared our sense of humor and didn't pay much mind to her gender. That seems like a pretty good instinct, right? But let's just acknowledge the situation for what it is. In this particular context, I'm literally trying to keep D&D a boys' club. I don't know, it might appear a bit silly to be contemplating feminist ideas as they pertain to my ability to make a diarrhea joke. But I do sense that there is some interesting analogies that could be made to a more serious battleground. One point that I will make is that unlike a work environment, etc., we're talking about a social group that's not supposed to be made available to people of every stripe. Anyway, I'm starting to drift up my own ass. So this seems like a good place to stop. What do you think, Reddit? Am I being an asshole? So if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I'm no stranger to edgy and lowbrow humor. It's what I find funny, so I may be a bit biased in my judgment here. But believe it or not, I actually don't think that husband's wife is at fault, based off the information that's been given. It sounds to me like husband is speaking for his wife, instead of letting her speak for herself. Hell, for all we know, she could have the most fucked up sense of humor out of all of you. But husband just assumes that she's offended, despite finding the jokes funny himself in the past. And if she is genuinely offended, why even bring her there to begin with? It's like a simultaneous mix of a savior complex, mixed with an entitled need to have pre-established groups cater to your every wanton desire. People like this really irritate me. You know, the kind of people who just muscle their way into things to be offended for you? It's kinda like when you take a closer look at the people who are offended because they think orcs are a racist metaphor for minority groups. When you peel away the Tumblr-esque profile pictures, you reveal a group of people so privileged that the only thing about them that isn't white is the rainbow dye in their hair. But I'm getting off topic, aren't I? Regardless of whether or not it's wife or husband wanting you to clean up your act, it's still someone trying to tell you how to enjoy yourself in an environment that you and your friends cultivated, not the asshole. So this has been a fun change of pace. It actually was a pretty fun way to change things up while not interrupting the normal vibes of the channel. But what did you all think? Did you enjoy this dive into r/am I the asshole? Do you agree with my judgments? Let me know down in the comments what you thought of each story and if you want to see more of this subreddit. Now before we go, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art is done by Spooky Panda Girl and is titled The Many Faces of Drake. We got all the phases that cringe hoarders go through. We got your classic smug bastard, laughing at other people's expense, realizing that I'm kind of a piece of shit, really realizing that I'm kind of a piece of shit. The emotions spawned from a traumatic childhood beginning to boil up out of a deep dark pit in my stomach that I've kept them trapped in for years. And finally, those buried emotions manifesting themselves as explosive outbursts that only serve to push those who care about me away, leaving me feeling even more isolated and alone than I was before. Hey, wouldn't it be fun if we just focused on these two instead? Thank you again, Spooky Panda Girl, for sending in your art. If you want to see your artwork featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. I love receiving and reviewing fan art. It means the world to me that I can create content that inspires artists like you to create artwork like this. Now that the stories are over and the artwork has been displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.